For years it has lured people in with its serene surface and crystal-clear waters, but beneath the beauty of Jacob's Well lies something far more disturbing, something that has claimed the lives of at least a dozen divers. It's not just a spring, it's a trap, a place where light disappears, time slows, and the earth itself seems to swallow people whole. But now, for the first time, an underwater drone has dared to go where so many never returned. What it found chilled experts to the bone. Why did divers vanish inside this cave system? What was captured on that drone footage? And what horrifying secrets lie buried in the silt and shadows? These are the questions that have haunted scientists, divers, and families for decades. Located in Texas Hill Country, just outside Wimberley, Jacob's Well appears like a natural oasis. To the untrained eye, it's a peaceful swimming hole nestled between limestone rocks. But to the diving community, it's one of the most feared cave systems in North America. Over the years, myths and stories have swirled around this place about divers who got lost, who ran out of air, or who were simply never found. But myths don't leave behind equipment. Myths don't wear wetsuits or carry oxygen tanks. And when an underwater drone was finally deployed to explore what lies beneath, the truth turned out to be worse than any legend. This is more than just a deep cave. It's a maze of razor-thin passageways, collapsing gravel beds, and haunting discoveries. And among them, something unexpected surfaced, evidence tied to one of the most infamous missing divers in Jacob's Well history. Today we take you inside Jacob's Well, down through the chilling footage and into the story of Kent Maupin, a man who entered the well in 1979 and never came back. Stay with us, because once you see what lies below, you'll never look at natural beauty the same way again. The decision to send a drone into Jacob's Well wasn't made lightly. After years of speculation, failed dives, and tragic losses, the need for a safer way to explore the cave's depths became undeniable. That's when a team of researchers and geologists teamed up with drone engineers to launch a mission that could finally uncover what lay hidden in the well's darkest corners without risking human lives. The drone they used was called Explorer, a custom-built submersible designed specifically for navigating tight underwater environments. It was compact, maneuverable, and equipped with high-definition cameras, sonar imaging, and powerful LED lights. Every inch of the mission was carefully planned, because one wrong move could mean losing the drone forever in the narrow maze beneath the surface. On the morning of the descent, a small crowd gathered near the edge of Jacob's Well. Local media, curious residents, and even some families of past victims stood quietly watching as the team prepared Explorer for its historic dive. The water, as always, looked deceptively calm, but the people there knew better. At the controls was Mike Garfield, an experienced drone operator who had explored underwater wrecks and tunnels across the country. But he admitted this mission was different. There was a weight to it. Everyone watching knew what had happened here before, and now they were hoping for answers. As Mike gently lowered the drone into the well, the surface rippled. The moment felt eerie, like the calm before a storm. On the monitor, the first images came into view: bright blue water and the smooth limestone walls of the well's vertical shaft. The clarity was breathtaking. Slowly, Explorer descended deeper. Light from the surface began to fade, replaced by the drone's artificial glow. At 30 feet, it reached the first chamber, an open, cavernous area with walls worn smooth by decades of flowing water. Here, everything seemed still, undisturbed, but that peace wouldn't last long. Mike guided the drone through a narrow passage known by divers as the Birth Canal. It was tight, sloped, and filled with loose gravel, exactly the kind of place that could trap even the smallest submersible if not navigated with care. As Explorer pushed forward, its lights illuminated unsettling details: broken equipment, twisted ropes, and silt-covered tanks, reminders of those who had come before. Then, the second chamber opened up, darker and wider than the first. It was here that Explorer began to uncover the first true signs of something different. Shadows shifted unnaturally across the screen. Silt swirled without any clear source of motion. At one point, the drone's camera captured what looked like a shape, human in size, disappearing into the gloom. The room fell silent. The live feed continued, but something had changed. This wasn't just exploration anymore, this was a search. A search for truth, for closure, and for the people who never made it back. As the drone hovered inside the second chamber, its camera caught something strange. Small disturbances in the water that didn't seem to come from the drone itself. Mike paused. Everyone watching the monitor leaned in. There, beneath the silt and shadows, something flickered, and then the drone's light caught it. The unmistakable outline of an oxygen tank caked in dirt and half buried in the gravel. It wasn't new. The tank was corroded, the metal faded, but it wasn't ancient either. It looked like it had been there for decades, untouched, undisturbed. A ghost from a past dive. Mike steadied the drone and zoomed in. Next to the tank was a pair of fins wedged between rock crevices and a worn piece of webbing that looked like part of a diving harness. The silence in the control room grew heavy. This wasn't just old gear. This was a sign of someone who had never come back. As Explorer moved cautiously deeper, it entered the third chamber. The drone's lights illuminated the smooth, curving rock walls as the passage widened, then narrowed again. It was in this in-between zone, where visibility dropped and the gravel thickened, that the mission took a grim turn. Suddenly, the drone sensors alerted to a large obstruction ahead. The video feed showed a dark mass slumped against the cave wall. Mike brought the drone in closer, brushing just above the silt. As the light adjusted, the shape took form. A wetsuit, torn, faded and clinging to what could only be described as skeletal remains. Gasps broke out in the control room. For a moment, no one spoke. The diver had been lodged tightly between two stone shelves, his gear still partially intact. A cracked mask hung loosely from the remains, and across the wetsuit's chest, a name patch, barely readable, read, Kent Maupin. The name echoed like a thunderclap. Kent Maupin had disappeared in 1979. Alongside fellow diver Mark Brasier, he had ventured into Jacob's Well in search of the fourth chamber. They never returned. Their story became legend in the diving community, cautionary, mysterious, and filled with unanswered questions. And now, after more than 4 decades, there he was, found not by a diver, but by a machine. The team immediately halted further movement. This wasn't just a technical discovery, it was human, emotional, historic. They called in authorities and began preserving the footage for documentation and review. But even as the reality of what they'd found settled in, something else weighed heavy. Mike backed the drone up slightly, panning its camera around the rest of the chamber. More gear, more clues. Another tank half buried. What looked like a fin jammed into a crack. And faint disturbances in the silt, as if someone had crawled, struggled, or tried to escape. This wasn't just where Kent had stopped. It might have been where he had fought to survive. The footage was unlike anything seen before in Jacob's, well, not just because of the visuals, but because of the implications. For years, this cave system had taken lives and kept its secrets, but now it was talking, and its story was tragic, haunting, and deeply human. What happened to Kent Maupin inside this maze of stone and silence? Why did he keep going, even when others turned back? And what drove him and Mark to the place divers feared most? The answers, it seemed, were buried in the gravel, still clinging to the remains of gear and bones. But the drone had opened a door, one no one expected to. Find, September 9th, 1979. It was supposed to be another dive, just one more adventure in the books for Kent Maupin. He wasn't a beginner. In fact, Kent was an experienced diver known for his fearlessness and passion for underwater exploration. Alongside him that day was Mark Brasier, a college student with a thirst for adventure and a deep admiration for Kent. What started as an exploration quickly spiraled into tragedy. The two friends, part of a group of divers from Pasadena, Texas, arrived at Jacob's Well with high hopes. Kent had talked for years about diving this site. He was fascinated by the legends surrounding its fourth chamber, a place so narrow, so treacherous, that even the most seasoned divers feared it. For Kent, that danger wasn't a deterrent. It was a challenge. And Mark, loyal and eager, followed him into the unknown. That night, The team gathered at the site under a darkening sky. The air was thick with anticipation. Some divers prepared cautiously. But Kent and Mark? They didn't use guide ropes. They brought steel tanks with limited air. They didn't carry backup lights. It was risky. But to them it was worth it. At the edge of the water, a diver named Joe watched Kent and Mark disappear below. At first, everything seemed normal. But as they reached the deeper chambers, Joe noticed something that made his stomach twist. Kent and Mark weren't turning back. They were pushing forward toward the most dangerous part of the well. Joe tried to signal them, banging his knife against his tank. No response. The water around him turned murky. Gravel shifted. Visibility dropped. Fear set in. Joe surfaced, shaken and alone. Kent and Mark were gone. News spread quickly. Local authorities contacted expert diver Don Dibble, a former Navy diver and one of the few qualified for such a hazardous recovery mission. Don assembled a team and prepared for what everyone feared would be a body retrieval. On the first dive, the team found the situation worse than expected. Gravel had collapsed into the tightest parts of the cave. Visibility was near zero, the fee. Current pulled in unpredictable directions. Still, Don pressed forward, hoping to locate the missing men. Then something went wrong. As Don tried to enter a narrow passage believed to be the final location of Kent and Mark, the gravel suddenly shifted. In seconds, he was stuck, trapped by the collapsing walls. Water turned cloudy, cutting off visibility. Don's breathing quickened. His tank was wedged. Panic threatened to take over. In the silence of the deep, Don made a choice few could even comprehend. He began to drink the water, not inhale, but swallow it, hoping to end his suffering quickly and quietly. But in a twist of fate, his body convulsed. The movement freed him just enough. Another diver, Calvin Turner, appeared in the haze and handed Don a spare regulator. He lived, but just barely. Back on the surface, Don's condition deteriorated. The pressure from his deep dive caused his stomach to expand painfully. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered a ruptured stomach wall. The damage was severe, akin to multiple burst appendices. It was a miracle he survived. Despite the heroic efforts, Kent and Mark were never recovered. The team eventually halted their attempts, concluding that further dives were too dangerous. The passage, where the divers were last seen, was sealed off. Officially, the search ended 12 days after their disappearance. But for many, the mystery never faded. What drove Kent and Mark to push so far with so little preparation? Was it ambition, naivety, a desire to be remembered? In the end, Kent Maupin's story became a legend. Not just a cautionary tale, but a symbol of the eternal human drive to explore, even when the price is unimaginable. And now, decades later, that drive led to his rediscovery, not by fellow divers, but by a machine. A machine that didn't fear tight passages, a drone that didn't need air, a camera that could finally shine light on a story buried in darkness for 45 years. The rediscovery of Kent Maupin's remains wasn't just a moment of closure. It was a moment of reckoning. For years, his name had lived on in diving circles as a cautionary tale, a symbol of ambition and tragedy. But seeing his gear, his name patch, and ultimately his remains through the lens of a drone, transformed that legend into something deeply human and heartbreakingly real. The footage stunned viewers across the world. News outlets picked up the story and diving communities reopened long silent discussions about safety, risk, and the psychology of extreme exploration. Families of other missing divers came forward, some wondering if their loved ones might still rest within Jacob's Well's unforgiving corridors. But the footage also brought back the harrowing memories of the recovery efforts, especially those faced by Don Dibble. His near-death experience inside the cave was recounted again and again, a reminder that even those trained to retrieve the fallen were nearly lost themselves. It sparked calls for stricter regulations, more safety, measures, and a fresh review of how open such dangerous sites should remain to the public. In the wake of the drone's discovery, local officials decided to reinforce protective barriers around Jacob's Well and limit diving access to only approved research missions. The footage also inspired renewed interest in the geology and hydrology. of the area, with scientists hoping to better map and understand what still lies beneath. But more than policy changes or scientific goals, it was the emotional weight of the discovery that resonated most. Kent's story became something more than a legend. It became a personal reminder of how far people will go in search of something greater. In his pursuit of the unknown, he became a symbol of both human courage and human fragility. The Explorer. Drone had done more than capture footage. It had given a family a piece of peace. It had turned a myth into a memory. And in doing so, it proved that even in the most silent, unreachable places, the truth can still be found, if we dare to look. Even now, Jacob's Well remains a place of paradox, breathtaking in its natural beauty, yet feared for the secrets it refuses to give up. The footage captured by the underwater drone offered answers, yes, but it also raised new questions, unsettling, unresolved, and echoing beneath the surface. Why did Kent and Mark venture deeper when others turned back? Was it ambition, recklessness, or the seductive pull of the unknown? Why did Kent's remains lie in the third chamber? Was it his final resting place, or was he trying to escape the fourth? And what of the fourth chamber itself? The footage didn't reach it. The drone, limited by debris and technical risk, had to retreat, meaning the deepest and most dangerous part of Jacob's Well remains unexplored, untouched, and unconfirmed. Some divers still whisper about what lies there: strange currents, shifting gravel, and narrow squeezes where even sound seems to vanish. Today, the entrance to Jacob's Well is more protected than ever. Metal grates block unauthorized access. New regulations limit diving permits, but still the legend grows. Videos circulate online, conspiracy theories emerge, and thrill seekers keep asking, what's really down there? And in truth, no one fully knows. Despite technology, despite decades of exploration, despite human loss, the well continues to guard its heart, a place shaped by time, pressure, and silence, a place where water cuts rock and memory becomes myth. Kent Maupin's rediscovery did more than solve a mystery. It reignited our obsession with places we don't understand, with the idea that even in a world mapped by satellites and scanned by sonar, there are still places left that remain completely unknown. Perhaps that's what makes Jacob's Well so powerful. It reminds us that nature isn't just scenery, it's a force, beautiful, silent, unforgiving. And sometimes it answers back in whispers we can't always understand. The drone may have revealed part of the story, but Jacob's Well is far from done speaking. And the next time someone looks into those clear waters, they won't just see a spring, they'll see a question, one that might never be fully answered.